Let me tell you a story of how I healed my difficult relationship with my mom with just this one simple thing, and how you can heal any relationship that you have too with this one thing. My mother and I had a complicated, super complicated, very unique and difficult relationship. When I was young, it felt to me as if she controlled my entire reality. Now, she was a complicated woman herself. She was deeply strict and unbelievably, enchantingly vivacious. She was tough, she was smart, she was full of life, and she was always in the latest, most elegant fashion. She was gorgeous. In our home, what she said was law. I was not allowed to close my door. There was absolutely no privacy. And I was expected to do what she wanted, the way she wanted it done. And whenever she said, "Just remember, you're living in my house," my father backed her up. He simply would say, "Listen to your mother." And my mom was undeniable about fitting in and having the right image. What we wore, the way we did our hair, the way we appeared on the outside was super important to her and was rarely my choice. Now, although I wouldn't know it until years later, my mom was actually a Holocaust survivor. She had learned early on that the best way to stay safe was to fit in, pretend to be something else if you must, and protect yourself at all costs. So, of course, everything about me, a naturally unique and very rebellious type, was confronting and very challenging for her. In Canada, my mom met my dad. My dad was suave, charming, good-looking. I swear to God, he looked like a movie star. And he was 20 years her senior. But when my mom found out she was pregnant with my sister, with it came the news that my dad was, in fact, still married to another woman back in the old country. But my dad loved my mom fiercely, and so he got an annulment. And in her own words, my mother said she loved him too, but honestly, she married him for security. And she was saving to go back to medical school, but quit her dreams once again and dedicated herself to raising her family. And my mother navigated all in her way. Tough, she was grounded, and always, as I said, put together. So as I mentioned before, fitting in was incredibly important, but to both my parents. They did everything they could to fit the bill in the WASP society, or the white Anglo-Saxon world they found themselves in. They presented themselves in whatever ways they thought would make them most acceptable, and they expected us to do the same. But as a child, I began to have dreams of what I didn't know at the time was the Holocaust. And when I told my mom about them and the horrible things I saw in those nightmares, she acted so strangely toward me she wouldn't even touch me. But she still wanted to be in control of my every move. So from really early on, and I think I was maybe 4 years old, there was always a feeling of push-pull, love-hate dynamic that infused our bond. And I always felt trapped, and I didn't know why. As I said, my mother was complicated, and I know she loved me, but our relationship was so strangely sticky too, and codependent. She was somehow both my close friend and my super strict mom. I think she found all kinds of ways of contending with my rebelliousness, so there was a lot of mixed messages as she was trying to make it work. She was super strict, and yet she was super lenient when it suited her. If I wanted to skip school, my mom would come pick me up and lie to the school for me, and we'd sit around and watch soap operas together. Then I'd have to go do my homework. So at a very early age, I began to struggle. I was so confused. I did not fit the image of the way my mom wanted me to be. I was different, and I was trying to figure out who I was, where I fit in, and what I was supposed to be. So as I navigated the complex dynamics of a family full of challenging behaviors and traumas I didn't understand or even know about, I was also navigating my own growing psychic abilities, which I had absolutely no context or understanding for. I didn't understand why I felt everything everyone else felt, or knew things that I shouldn't. I gotta be honest, I felt tormented. I felt misunderstood, I was angry, I was confused, and I never, ever felt safe inside myself. And then years later, my father, who had the classic immigrant rags to riches story, rolled the dice and went all in on an amazing new business venture and ended up losing all the family's money. And with it, they're standing in the community. He was 75 years old and he just couldn't bounce back. And all of their friends turned on them and they lost their status at the many clubs and groups they were part of. You know, their old friends and people they knew treated them like they had a contagious disease. It was awful. It was devastating for our family. My dad checked out completely. He got Alzheimer's. He went from being a brilliant, engaged, and present man to a shell of himself. My mom went into full survival mode. The woman I had never seen shed a tear dissolved into a weeping mess on a daily basis. And with the family dynamic falling apart, I began to fall apart too. And my parents began drinking. Now, I can't say they were alcoholics, but drinking too much became a really normal part of our family life. My mom would tell us how we had lost everything and we had to support the family now. And before long, we started drinking together as a family. But I had become an alcoholic at a much earlier age. I remember knowing as early as 12 years old that I had a problem. At 14, I became bulimic, and for years to come, I battled drug addiction, an eating disorder, alcoholism, along with deep emotional pain and trauma. Now, in other words, my fourth energy, the energy of the heart, was completely out of alignment. My need for community, for acceptance and love weren't being met. And I was wrapped in a deep bitterness that stopped me from giving the love and forgiveness I needed to myself or to my mother. In order to deal with the stress and everything that happened to my family, I knew I needed to get away. Now, I'd always wanted to get away. Years before, I ran away from home twice, but this time I left home 2 years clean and sober. I moved in with my boyfriend, and I sent money back to help support the family. But of course, my mother felt completely abandoned. She would call me literally every day saying, "Why don't you call your mother?" Like every day. But I knew I couldn't go back. I was battling my own pain and working hard to stay clean and sober. And in my process of cleaning up my life, I also found my spirituality. And with it, for the first time, I was able to come to terms with my resentment towards my mom, to try and actually understand her for the first time. You see, one day, right after the financial loss, when she had too much to drink, my mom let her big secret slip. Okay, so we grew up going to church every single Sunday, and I loved going to church. We believed our mother to be a devout Christian, but as it turned out, my mother was Jewish. She finally told me the truth about the dreams I had when I was a kid and why they had terrified her so much. I'd been dreaming of the concentration camps. During the Holocaust, World War II, her mother had been killed by a bomb. Her dad was captured and sent to Dachau, and she was adopted by a Christian family who worked for her grandparents. This kind Christian couple raised her as their own, and she even shared how her adopted parents would hide her when the Nazi youth came to the door, saying she was too sick to come out. And for the first time in the process of my own healing, I realized how much I had misunderstood my mother. I believed that I had an abusive, demanding, controlling mother. But when I got clean and sober and I devoted myself to my spiritual life and took a really good hard look in the mirror, I learned the most valuable lesson, that it is better to understand than to be understood. I understood finally that she was terrified of being discovered. I was raised by a woman who believed that if you were different, if there was anything at all that could make you stand out in society's eyes, it was dangerous and it had to go. And when I saw her from that perspective, I understood that she had done everything she did to protect me. And with this new perspective, I began the process of forgiving and accepting my mother. Then a few years after that, she got brain cancer, and I knew I had to finally fully forgive her. All those years, the anger had been eating me up inside, and I was ready. I was finally ready to be free of the story of being a victim of abuse and trauma and bad parenting. I didn't want that story for myself anymore, and I didn't want that burden for her either. It was not the real truth, and there could be no more blame. And as I sat with her in the hospital, holding her hand, I got the opportunity to find the inner peace and acceptance and love that I had craved for so long. Not only did I finally understand my mother's motives, I also saw my own part in things, and I understood that I had a part in it, that I had perpetuated this story by the fact that I had never cared to learn about my mother or to understand her. That it was a lot to comprehend and admit to, but we had made peace, and she died the next day. I saw that not only had my mom been the only way she could be, but that it must have been so difficult for her to raise a child like me. I mean, I saw how afraid she was that she could lose me or that I would be unsafe. I was unsafe. I saw her fear and how much she did to protect me. But most of all, I changed my story. My past could be rewritten now, and I now believe that I am the daughter of a Holocaust survivor who did everything she could to protect me, and she was the best mom that she could be. And I only remember the best of her, and I also know that I'm a different person as a result of forgiveness and acceptance. This is what the fourth energy is all about. It's about our deep need for acceptance, connections, and unconditional love. And when we forgive, we allow ourselves and others the grace to be human. Forgiveness is simply a commitment to stop telling an old story so you don't have to carry its burden anymore. And when we change our story, we can return to love, the healer of all wounds, and find the inner peace we all crave. The fourth energy is one of the most obvious, as you often feel it right in the heart. But it's also often projected by a huge aura. You always can tell when a loving person has a big loving heart. They just seem to project a huge loving energy, like their aura is a massive wall of energy you're drawn to. When it's in alignment, it's all about being in healthy community and about healing. It's also about forgiveness, love without conditions, and an open heart. How you manage the fourth energy depends on your openness and your true desire for being in a supportive community where you contribute from your heart. When the fourth energy is out of balance, you may experience a sense of rejection, you might feel unloved, and then aspects of grief or impending loss take over. You start to close down, or you may become attracted to people who don't have the capacity for love. So what do you think? After learning about energy 4, do you feel that's the energy that you need to show a little more love to? Look for some links here we've created that will help you learn more about each energy. And if you haven't done so already, take the alignment quiz to find out more.